The Hudson River in New York, once known as America's Rhine and homage to the famous European waterway, played an important role in bolstering American power at the expense of decades of foul pollution. The health of the Hudson River has suffered greatly since industrialization took hold on its banks. Sewage and chemicals have infiltrated the waterway, disrupting ecosystems and killing species such as the bay anchovy, blueback herring, and white perch. In this video, we'll take a look at why NYC is cleaning up the Hudson River. The Hudson River, which runs for 350 miles, is steeped in American history. During the Industrial Revolution, it served as a transportation route for commerce and guided Henry Hudson in his search for a northwest passage. Industry created jobs, communities, and economic growth in the region. However, industrial pollution left its mark on the cherished river. The EPA has designated 200 miles of the Hudson River as a Superfund site, making it one of the largest in the country. By the 1960s, the river had degraded into an industrial sewer, according to Greg Williams, executive director of the Beacon-based environmental advocacy group Hudson River Sloop Clearwater. The president of the Ossining-based nonprofit Riverkeeper, Paul Galley, recalls a tragic status quo. Pollution became the norm, not the exception. Everyone looked the other way for decades, while the fish began to stink like oil. People wouldn't let their children play near the river, and boats were befouled by residue or oil. As a result, many current Hudson Valley residents have a distant relationship with the water. We admire it from afar, drive over it, and boat across it. We don't swim in it, and we're not supposed to catch, clean, and eat the fish that live in it. Our apprehension is justified. The Environmental Protection Agency designated a long stretch of the river, referring to some of the nation's most contaminated land. The General Motors plant in North Tarrytown begins manufacturing automobiles and dumping industrial waste into the Hudson River. A slew of factories will follow suit in the coming decades, turning the Hudson River into an industrial sewer. Engineers deepen the river, allowing larger ships to pass faster but wiping out much of the shallow water ecosystems that contributed to its beauty. Factories producing cars and paper dumped oil, heavy metals, dye, solvents, cleaning fluids, and paint into the Hudson. Several stretches of the river were effectively dead. With the fish starved of oxygen in the water, fishermen in the lower river could tell what color General Motors was painting cars that day in the 1970s by looking at their nets. General Electric dumped an estimated 1.3 million pounds of polychlorinated biphenyls into the Hudson River between 1947 and 1977. The PCB discharges were caused by two GE capacitor manufacturing plants in Fort Edward and Hudson Falls, New York, about 50 miles north of Albany. PCBs from GE have been discovered in sediment, water, and wildlife throughout the Hudson River ecosystem, as far south as New York Harbor. They can also be found in humans. Almost as soon as the Hudson began to enrich the United States, the river spawned one of the country's first environmental movements, as middle-class New Yorkers protested the logging of its surrounding forest and blasting of the Palisades, a line of steep cliffs on the river's west side for construction materials. The Hudson River's recovery has gained momentum since local environmental activism inspired intervention by the courts, then the federal government to address pollution. The Clean Water Act has reduced the practice of dumping toxins into the river haphazardly, and the decline of industry in the region has removed many of the most visible blights. Some issues remain. Power plants, such as Indian Point, draw cooling water from the Hudson, killing millions of fish each year. They are basically massive mechanized fishermen. General Electric spent 5 years dredging the riverbed to clean up the PCB problem, but it was not a complete solution. Contamination levels in both fish and sediment have remained alarmingly high. Still, swimming and kayaking are now permitted on the Hudson, a significant improvement from just a few decades ago. And the survival of the sturgeons suggests that it can revert to a fully functioning ecosystem. The EPA issued a record of decision for the Hudson River PCB Superfund site in February 2002, calling for targeted environmental dredging of approximately 2.65 million cubic yards of PCB-contaminated sediment from Fort Edward to Troy, New York. Dredge areas were identified using the results of GE's multi-year sediment sampling program, which began in 2002 and yielded over 60,000 sediment samples taken from the bottom of the Upper Hudson River. The Upper Hudson River runs from Hudson Falls to the Federal Dam at Troy, and the Lower Hudson River runs from the Federal Dam at Troy to the southern tip of Manhattan at the Battery in New York City. The EPA further divided the upper Hudson River area for dredging purposes into three main sections, known as River Section 1, from the former Fort Edward Dam to the Thompson Island Dam, River Section 2 from the Thompson Island Dam to the Northumberland Dam, and River Section 3 from the Northumberland Dam to the Federal Dam in Troy. Dredging was done in areas of about 5 acres, each within the river sections, which were referred to as certification units. Dredging for river bottom sediment began in 2009 and was finished in the fall of 2015. Dredging was done in 2 stages. The first year of dredging took place between May and November 2009. During Phase 1, approximately 283,000 cubic yards of contaminated sediment were removed from a 6-mile stretch of the upper Houston River near the town of Fort Edward, New York. In 2010, the EPA developed plans for the second phase of the cleanup after an extensive evaluation by an independent panel of scientists and input from a wide range of stakeholders. Phase 2 began in June 2011 and was carried out at full capacity to remove the remaining contaminated river sediment destined for dredging. Approximately 2.5 million cubic yards were dredged during Phase 2. Approximately 2.75 million cubic yards of PCB-contaminated sediment were removed from the river bottom over the course of 6 seasons of dredging. The 2015 Phase 2 Overview Fact Sheet includes a series of maps that show where dredging occurred during the growing season following the year in which the area was dredged. Some areas were repopulated with aquatic plants. Following the completion of dredging, habitat reconstruction began and continued into 2016. GE completed both phases of the cleanup in accordance with the terms of a legal agreement signed in November 2006. GE agreed to conduct and pay for the second phase of cleanup in December 2010. GE performed all dredging and related work under EPA supervision. In 2016, GE's 100-acre Fort Edward processing facility, which was built to process and transport dredged material off-site, was also dismantled and decontaminated in accordance with an EPA-approved facility demobilization and restoration plan. The properties on which the GE facility was built are being returned to their rightful owners in collaboration with the town and village of Fort Edward. The primary property owner is investigating options for reusing the site to support future economic development. The 2002 Record of Decision, which called for dredging along a 40-mile stretch of the upper Hudson River, also stated that the PCB contamination in low-lying shoreline areas prone to flooding, known as the floodplain, should be assessed. A comprehensive study of the contamination in the floodplains is underway as the dredging project enters the long-term monitoring phase. An assessment of cleanup options will be part of the comprehensive investigation. The EPA's 2-pronged cleanup strategy included targeted environmental dredging, followed by a period of monitored natural recovery. With the completion of dredging, the project has moved on to a robust monitoring phase that will track the river's long-term recovery over time to ensure that the cleanup is working as intended. This includes monitoring of sediment, fish, water, reconstructed habitats, and the caps placed in some of the river's PCB-contaminated areas. The EPA will also continue to review the project every 5 years. Water column monitoring will continue to assess PCB concentrations throughout the upper and lower Hudson rivers, as well as to track PCB transport from the upper to lower Hudson rivers. The EPA anticipates that water column monitoring will continue in the near future. Sediment monitoring will also continue to assess PCB concentrations in sediment throughout the upper Hudson River, both dredged and undredged areas, over time. Every 5 years, sediment samples will be collected to track the recovery. New York's waterways have a bad reputation for being filthy, disgusting cesspools. The Hudson River, on the other hand, is the cleanest it has been in 100 years and is home to a thriving ecosystem. And with that being said, it is time to end our video. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing videos like this. We'll see you with another interesting video.